really look at you, because what I'm about to say isn't easy, not for me to admit, and probably not for you to hear. But we've reached that point. You know the one, where silence becomes heavier than words, where comfort starts to feel like a slow betrayal of something we both know is true. I've spent months, maybe years, choosing ease over honesty, telling myself that keeping the peace was the same as keeping us whole. But here's what I've learned. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for someone you love is to stop protecting them from the truth. Not because you want to hurt them, but because you respect them enough to believe they can handle it, that they deserve it, that the discomfort of honesty is still lighter than the weight of a beautiful lie. So I'm taking a steady exhale, and I'm saying what needs to be said, not because it's comfortable, but because we've earned something more valuable than comfort. We've earned the truth. I used to think love meant never making the other person uncomfortable, that if I truly cared, I'd smooth every edge, soften every truth, keep everything gentle and warm. I thought that's what partnership was, a refuge from the harshness of the world, a place where you never had to flinch. And for a while, that felt right. It felt like love. But then something shifted. I started noticing the weight in my chest every time I swallowed a truth, the way my silence felt less like protection and more like distance. The way you'd look at me sometimes, not with gratitude, but with a quiet confusion, like you could sense something missing but couldn't name it. That's when I realized I wasn't protecting you. I was protecting myself from conflict, from the risk of being wrong, from the possibility that honesty might crack the comfortable rhythm we'd built. And here's the part that gutted me. I was treating you like you couldn't handle reality, like you needed me to edit the world before it reached you, as if you were fragile, as if truth was a luxury only I could afford. But you're not fragile. You never were. And by keeping things easy, I was keeping us shallow. Have you ever been in a relationship where everything was fine, but nothing was real? Where conversations stayed surface level because going deeper felt too risky? Where you both agreed to pretend certain truths didn't exist because naming them might disturb the peace? I have, and I'll tell you what it does. It doesn't preserve love. It slowly erodes it. Because love without honesty isn't love, it's a performance. A beautiful, exhausting performance where both people are too afraid to drop the script. Here's what nobody tells you about choosing comfort over honesty. It works. For a while. You avoid the hard conversations. You keep things smooth. You preserve the illusion that everything's perfect. But comfort has a cost. And that cost is intimacy. Real intimacy. The kind that comes from being fully seen and still choosing each other. The kind that survives disagreement because it's built on truth, not agreement. When you prioritize ease, you get a relationship that looks good from the outside. But inside, you're both slowly becoming strangers who happen to share a bed. I watched this happen with us. Slowly, almost imperceptibly. We stopped challenging each other, stopped asking the hard questions, stopped naming the things that didn't feel right. We created this bubble where everything was pleasant and nothing was penetrating. And I told myself that was maturity, that was wisdom, that was us being good to each other. But maturity isn't avoiding conflict. It's having the courage to engage with reality, even when reality is uncomfortable. Wisdom isn't keeping the peace at any cost. It's knowing when the peace is costing too much. So I started asking myself a different question. Not how do I keep this easy, but how do I keep this real? Not how do I avoid hurting you, but how do I love you enough to risk temporary discomfort for long-term integrity? And that shift changed everything. Because suddenly, honesty wasn't the enemy of love. It was the foundation. The thing that made everything else possible. Trust, growth, actual partnership. Not the kind where one person manages the other's emotions, but the kind where both people show up fully, truthfully, courageously. Let me tell you what happened the first time I chose honesty over ease. We were in the middle of one of those conversations that could have gone either way. You said something that wasn't true, not maliciously, just inaccurate. And normally I would have let it slide. Nodded, moved on, kept things smooth. But this time, I didn't. I took a steady exhale and said, "That's not actually what happened." And the air shifted. You looked at me like I'd broken a rule. And maybe I had. Maybe we'd built an unspoken agreement that we'd never correct each other, never challenge each other's version of events, never risk the friction that comes with disagreement. But here's what happened next. After the initial surprise, After the brief moment of tension, you respected it. Maybe not immediately, maybe not in that exact moment, but later, you told me you were glad I said something, that it felt more real, that you'd been tired of the version of us that never disagreed, never pushed back, never demanded more from each other. And that's when I understood. Honesty isn't a threat to love. Dishonesty is. Silence is. Comfort that comes at the cost of truth is. Tell me, when was the last time someone loved you enough to tell you something you didn't want to hear? Not to hurt you, not to prove a point, but because they believed you could handle it. Because they respected your capacity to metabolize reality. Because they trusted that the relationship was strong enough to survive the truth. I'm guessing it's been a while, because we live in a culture that confuses kindness with niceness, that treats difficult conversations like failures instead of investments, that values harmony over honesty, even when that harmony is hollow. But here's what I've learned about relationships that last. They're not built on agreement, they're built on integrity, on two people who are willing to say the hard things, because they know that avoiding them only delays the inevitable, on trust that runs deep enough to survive disagreement, on love that's more committed to truth than to comfort. And that requires something most people aren't willing to give: courage. The courage to exhale slowly and say what needs to be said. The courage to receive truth without crumbling. The courage to build something real, even when real feels risky. I know what you're thinking, that this sounds harsh, that relationships should feel safe, that love should be a refuge, not a battlefield. And you're right, love should be safe. But safety doesn't mean you never feel uncomfortable. It means you can be uncomfortable together and still trust each other. It means the truth won't destroy you. It means you're both strong enough to handle reality without retreating into illusion. Real safety isn't the absence of challenge. It's the presence of trust, deep enough to survive it. So here's what I need you to understand. When I tell you something that's hard to hear, I'm not attacking you. I'm honoring you. I'm saying, I believe you can handle this. I'm choosing our long-term integrity over our short-term ease. I'm building something with you that's strong enough to hold the weight of truth. And yes, it might feel uncomfortable. It might crack the comfortable rhythm we've built. But comfort that requires dishonesty isn't comfort, it's a cage. And I don't want to build a cage with you. I want to build a foundation. The kind that can hold everything: joy and disappointment, agreement and conflict, celebration and correction. Because here's the thing about integrity: it's not sexy, it's not easy, it doesn't make for smooth conversations or effortless connection, but it's the only thing that lasts, the only foundation strong enough to hold a real relationship, the only alternative to slow erosion. And I'd rather have 6 months of real with you than 6 years of pretend. I'd rather risk the discomfort of honesty than guarantee the emptiness of a beautiful lie. I'd rather lose you by telling the truth than keep you by performing a version of myself that doesn't actually exist. So that's what I'm doing now, taking a steady exhale and saying the things that need to be said. Not because I want to hurt you, not because I'm trying to prove something, but because I love you enough to stop protecting you from reality. Because I respect you enough to believe you can handle it. Because I trust that what we have is strong enough to survive the truth. And if it's not, if honesty breaks us, then maybe what we had wasn't as solid as we thought. Maybe it was just comfortable. And comfort, I've learned, is a poor substitute for something real. There's a specific kind of pain that comes from being lied to. But there's a different kind, quieter, more corrosive, that comes from being handled. You know what I mean. When someone decides you can't handle the full picture, so they give you an edited version, a softer truth, a partial reality designed to protect your feelings. And the worst part? You can feel it. You might not be able to name it, you might not even be able to prove it, but somewhere deep in your gut, you know you're not getting the whole story. And that knowing, that feeling of being managed instead of trusted, it hollows you out in ways a hard truth never could. I've been on both sides of this. I've been the one edited out of someone's honesty, and I've been the editor carefully curating my words to keep someone comfortable. And I'll tell you which one damaged me more: being handled, being treated like I needed a filtered version of reality because the raw version might be too much for me. It sent a message I never asked to receive: that I was weak, that I couldn't be trusted with truth, that my capacity to handle life was smaller than the person doing the editing, and every time they chose comfort over honesty, they were really choosing their perception of me over the actual me. But here's what nobody told me. Protecting someone from the truth is one of the most arrogant things you can do. It sounds noble, it feels like love, but underneath it is a quiet assumption that you know better than they do, that you understand what they can handle more than they understand themselves, that your job is to mediate reality for them instead of trusting them to face it directly. And when you operate from that place, you're not building a partnership, you're building a hierarchy. One person holds the truth, the other gets the sanitized version. And slowly, without either of you fully realizing it, the relationship becomes unequal. Have you ever had someone tell you something months after it happened, and their explanation was, I didn't want to upset you? I have. And every time the same thought hits me, you didn't trust me. You didn't trust that I could handle it. You didn't trust that I had the strength, the resilience, the emotional capacity to metabolize something difficult. So you made a decision for me. You decided that your version of what I needed was more important than my right to reality. And maybe you thought that was love, but it wasn't. It was control, disguised as care. Let me be clear about something. I'm not saying you should weaponize honesty. I'm not talking about brutal, thoughtless truth telling that disregards timing or tenderness. There's a difference between honesty and cruelty, between transparency and tactlessness. What I'm talking about is the deliberate withholding of truth because you've decided someone can't handle it. The pattern of choosing their comfort over their autonomy. The habit of editing reality to keep things easy, even when easy means false. And that's when everything I believed fell apart. I realized that every time I chose ease over integrity, I was making a bet. I was betting that comfort mattered more than trust, that avoiding short term discomfort was worth long term disconnection, that keeping someone happy in the moment was more valuable than keeping them informed about reality. And I lost that bet every single time. Because comfort without truth isn't actually comfortable. It's anxious. It's fragile. It's the kind of peace that requires constant maintenance, constant editing, constant performance. And eventually, it collapses under its own weight. So I made a decision. I stopped managing people's emotions. I stopped deciding for others what they could or couldn't handle. I started operating from a different assumption that the people I love are strong enough for the truth, that they deserve reality, even when reality is uncomfortable, that my job isn't to shield them from life, but to stand beside them while they face it. And you know what happened? My relationships got harder, and they got real. The people who wanted to be handled, who preferred the edited version, they left. And the people who wanted to be trusted, they stayed. And we built something that didn't require constant curation. I'm talking to you right now because I think you're one of the ones who stays. I think you're tired of being protected from truths you're strong enough to carry. I think you've spent too long in relationships where you could feel the gaps, the omissions, the carefully constructed versions of reality designed to keep you calm. And I think you're ready for something different, something that doesn't require you to pretend you don't notice the spaces between what's said and what's true. Something built on the assumption that you're capable, resilient, and deserving of the whole story. But here's where it gets complicated. Choosing honesty over ease doesn't just change how others treat you, it changes what you demand from yourself. Because if you're asking people to stop protecting you from the truth, you have to stop protecting yourself from it too. You have to be willing to look at the things you've been avoiding, the patterns you've been excusing, the realities you've been softening because facing them fully felt too heavy. You have to take a steady exhale and admit, maybe I've been complicit in my own editing. Maybe I've trained people to handle me by refusing to handle myself. Tell me, how many times have you reacted so poorly to difficult news that people learn to keep things from you? I'm not blaming you. I'm asking you to be honest. Have you ever punished someone for telling you the truth? Made them regret their honesty? Responded with so much emotion, so much defensiveness, that they thought twice before being transparent again? Because here's what I've learned. If you want people to stop managing your emotions, you have to stop making your emotions everyone else's emergency. You have to create space for truth to land without detonating. This doesn't mean you can't feel. It doesn't mean you have to receive hard truths with a smile and a nod. But it does mean you have to develop the capacity to sit with discomfort without making the person who delivered it responsible for fixing it. It means you metabolize reality instead of rejecting it. It means you separate the message from the messenger. It means you understand that someone telling you something difficult is often an act of respect, not an attack. And when you can do that, when you can create that kind of space, people stop editing around you. They start trusting you with the whole story. I learned this the hard way. I used to react to every difficult truth like it was a personal assault. Someone would tell me something I didn't want to hear, and I'd spiral. I'd defend. I'd make it about their delivery instead of the content. I'd punish them emotionally for disrupting my comfort, and then I'd wonder why people kept things from me, why I always felt like I was getting the sanitized version, why my relationships felt shallow. I didn't realize I was training people to handle me, that every time I made honesty costly, I was buying myself a future of beautiful lies. So I changed the equation. I started rewarding honesty instead of punishing it. When someone told me something difficult, I took a breath. I said thank you. I sat with the discomfort instead of deflecting it. I made space for truth to exist without requiring immediate resolution. And slowly, people started trusting me with reality. Not the edited version, not the version designed to keep me calm, the real version, the full version. And that shift from being handled to being trusted, it changed everything. Because suddenly, I wasn't navigating relationships based on what people thought I could handle. I was navigating based on what was actually true. And here's the thing about truth. It's not always kind. It's not always convenient. It doesn't always arrive at the right time or in the right tone. But it's the only foundation that holds. The only alternative to the slow erosion that comes from living in edited realities. The only way to build something that doesn't require constant performance. And yes, it requires strength. It requires the willingness to feel uncomfortable without making that discomfort someone else's problem. It requires you to trust yourself enough to face reality without a mediator. So when I say you need to hear this, I'm not just talking about what I need to tell you. I'm talking about what you need to be able to receive. The capacity you need to build, the space you need to create for truth to land without destroying you. Because the people who love you really love you. They're carrying things they haven't said, not because they don't care, but because they're not sure you can handle it. They've seen how you react. They've felt the cost of your discomfort, and they've made the calculation that silence is safer than honesty. And if you want that to change, you have to change the cost structure. You have to make honesty safer than silence. I want to tell you about the moment I realized silence wasn't neutral, that it wasn't just the absence of words, it was a choice, a decision to let something unsaid take up space between us. And the longer I stayed quiet, the heavier that space became. I used to think I was being considerate, giving you room, not burdening you with every thought that crossed my mind. But what I was really doing was building a wall, brick by brick. Every swallowed truth, every edited response, every time I chose fine when I meant something else entirely. I was constructing distance and calling it respect. Here's what I didn't understand about unsaid things. They don't disappear, they accumulate, they ferment. They turn into resentment, into distance, into that specific kind of loneliness that only exists inside a relationship. You can be lying next to someone every night and still feel completely alone because the real you, the one carrying all those unspoken truths, is nowhere in the room. You've sent a representative. A carefully curated version that says the right things, avoids the wrong topics, keeps everything pleasant. And maybe that version is easier to love, but it's not actually you. I spent years being that representative, showing up as the edited version, the one who didn't make waves, who kept things light, who swallowed frustrations and packaged them as patience. And from the outside, it looked like emotional maturity. People praised me for being so calm, so understanding, so easy to be with. But inside, I was disappearing. The gap between who I was and who I was pretending to be kept growing. And every day, I felt a little less like myself and a little more like a performance of what I thought people needed me to be. But here's what nobody told me. The cost of that performance isn't just personal, it's relational. Because when you show up as the edited version, you don't get real connection. You get connection to the character you're playing. People fall in love with the representative, not the person. And then you're trapped. Trapped in a version of yourself that isn't sustainable. Trapped maintaining a performance that's slowly killing you. Trapped in relationships that would fall apart if you ever told the truth. And the tragedy isn't that those relationships would end, it's that you've spent years building them on a foundation that was never real. Wait, before you dismiss this as just another call to be yourself, hear me out. I'm not talking about dumping every thought and feeling without filter. I'm not talking about emotional exhibitionism or using honesty as an excuse for cruelty. I'm talking about something more fundamental: the willingness to let the people in your life see the parts of you that aren't easy, the parts that doubt, the parts that struggle, the parts that don't have it all figured out, the parts that need to say something difficult because keeping it inside is causing more damage than saying it ever could. I remember the first time I let someone see me fully, not the curated version, not the representative, the actual me, with all the contradictions and complications and fears I'd spent years hiding. And the terror of that moment was overwhelming. Because what if they rejected me? What if the real me was too much, too messy, too difficult? What if they preferred the edited version, the one that kept things smooth and never demanded too much emotional labor? But I was so tired, tired of performing, tired of managing, tired of being loved for a version of myself that didn't actually exist. So I took a steady exhale, and I let the mask slip. I said the things I'd been avoiding. I named the feelings I'd been minimizing. I stopped pretending everything was fine when it wasn't. And you know what happened? Some people left. And I'm not going to lie to you, that hurt. It hurt to realize they'd only signed up for the easy version. That the love they'd offered was conditional on my continued performance. That the moment I became real, I became too much. But here's the thing: they needed to leave. Because any relationship that requires you to stay small, to stay quiet, to stay edited, that's not a relationship. That's a transaction. And you're paying for acceptance with pieces of yourself. Have you ever calculated the cost of staying quiet? Not just in one moment, but accumulated over years. Every time you said it's fine when it wasn't. Every time you swallowed a boundary violation to keep the peace. Every time you let something slide that needed to be addressed. Every time you chose temporary comfort over long-term integrity. What did that cost you? Your sense of self, your ability to trust your own voice, your belief that your truth mattered. Because that's what silence does. It doesn't preserve relationships. It erodes your relationship with yourself. And that's when everything I believed fell apart. I realized I'd spent years prioritizing other people's comfort over my own integrity, making myself smaller so they could feel bigger, editing my truth so they didn't have to expand their capacity, taking responsibility for their emotional stability while completely abandoning my own. And I'd told myself that was love, that was sacrifice, that was what good people did. But it wasn't. It was self-abandonment. And every time I chose their ease over my honesty, I was teaching myself that my voice didn't matter, that my reality was less important than their comfort, that I was not worth the risk of disruption. So I stopped. I stopped making myself smaller. I stopped editing my truth to fit someone else's capacity. I stopped pretending that silence was neutral or that comfort was the same thing as connection. And I started speaking. Not perfectly, not always with the right timing or the ideal tone, but authentically, from a place of integrity instead of a place of fear. And some of what I said was hard to hear. Some of it created friction, some of it made people uncomfortable, but all of it was true. And for the first time in years, I felt like myself. Look at me for a second. Really look. Because I need you to understand something. When I tell you something difficult, I'm not trying to hurt you. I'm trying to honor both of us. I'm saying this relationship matters enough to me that I'm willing to risk your discomfort for our integrity. I'm choosing the us that could exist over the us that's comfortable but hollow. I'm betting that you're strong enough, resilient enough, big enough to hold this truth without breaking. And if I'm wrong, if you can't, then I'd rather know now than spend another year building something on a foundation of edited realities. Because here's what I know about relationships that last. They're not built by people who never have anything difficult to say. They're built by people who say the difficult things anyway, who take a steady exhale and speak from a place of integrity, even when it would be easier to stay quiet, who trust that the other person is capable of holding hard truths, who understand that temporary discomfort is the price of lasting connection, and who are willing to pay that price because they know the alternative, comfortable distance, is far more expensive. I'm not saying this is easy. It's not. Every time I choose honesty over ease, there's a moment of terror, a moment where I wonder if this will be the truth that breaks us, if this will be the thing that's too much. But then I remember what silence cost me, the years of feeling unknown, the relationships that looked perfect but felt empty, the exhaustion of maintaining a performance that was never sustainable. And I choose the risk of honesty over the guarantee of disconnection. So that's what I'm offering you now. Not comfort, not ease, not a version of me that's been carefully edited to keep you calm, but truth. Direct, sometimes uncomfortable, always authentic truth. The kind that might disrupt what we've built. The kind that might require you to expand your capacity. The kind that risks everything comfortable for the possibility of something real. And I'm asking you to meet me there, not in the space where everything is easy, but in the space where everything is honest, where we can both show up fully, truthfully, courageously, where we build something strong enough to hold the weight of reality. Because I'm done protecting you from my truth. I'm done managing your emotions at the expense of my integrity. I'm done choosing temporary peace over lasting connection. I'm done being the edited version. And if that's too much for you, if you need someone who will keep things smooth and never challenge you, then I respect that. But it won't be me, because I've learned that the only thing harder than telling the truth is living with the weight of all the truths you didn't tell. There's a version of you that exists only in other people's minds, a version built from all the times you said yes when you meant no, all the times you smiled through discomfort, all the times you let something go that should have been addressed. That version is easy, accommodating, never too much, never too demanding. And people love that version. They praise it. They rely on it. They build their entire relationship with you around the assumption that you'll always be that way. But here's the problem. That version isn't you. And every day you spend maintaining it, you drift further from the person you actually are. I know this because I've lived it. I built an entire identity around being low maintenance, around not making people work too hard to love me, around being the person who understood, who didn't push, who never needed too much. And it worked. People loved how easy I was, how little space I took up, how willing I was to bend, to adjust, to make room for everyone else's needs while quietly abandoning my own. And I told myself that was strength, that was maturity, that was proof I'd evolved beyond petty needs and selfish demands. But one night, I was lying in bed next to someone who loved me, and I felt completely alone. Not because they'd done anything wrong, but because they didn't actually know me. They knew the version I'd shown them, the one who never complained, never needed reassurance, never asked for anything difficult. They loved that version deeply. But that version was a ghost, a carefully constructed fiction designed to make loving me as frictionless as possible. And I realized I traded being known for being easy. And the loneliness of being loved for someone you're not is deeper than any loneliness I'd ever felt alone. That's when I understood something crucial about honesty. It's not just about telling the truth in moments of conflict. It's about living truthfully every single day. It's about letting people see your needs, your limits, your non-negotiables. It's about taking up the space you actually require instead of compressing yourself into the space you think people will tolerate. It's about being willing to be difficult, to be complex, to be fully human instead of conveniently simple. And yes, that means some people won't like you as much, but the ones who stay will actually know you. And that difference is everything. Here's what nobody tells you about becoming honest. It's not a single decision. It's a practice. A daily choice to speak from integrity instead of fear. And in the beginning, it feels dangerous. Every time you set a boundary, you brace for rejection. Every time you name a need, you wonder if it's too much. Every time you say something difficult, you prepare for the relationship to end. Because you've spent years learning that love is conditional, that acceptance requires performance, that the price of belonging is editing yourself into something more palatable. But here's what happened when I started practicing honesty. I stopped attracting people who needed me to be small, the ones who'd built their entire relationship with me around my willingness to accommodate, to defer, to disappear when convenient they left. And it hurt. Not because I wanted them to stay, but because their leaving confirmed what I'd always feared, that the real me was too much, that if I stopped performing, I'd be alone. But then something unexpected happened. New people showed up. People who weren't intimidated by my truth, who didn't need me to be easy, who actually preferred the unedited version because it meant they could be unedited too. Tell me, when was the last time you said something that scared you? Not something calculated to impress or designed to provoke, but something genuine that you weren't sure the other person could handle. Something that revealed a need, exposed a boundary, or named a feeling you'd been avoiding. When was the last time you risked being too much instead of guaranteeing you'd be enough? Because that's where growth lives. Not in the comfortable spaces where everyone agrees and nothing gets disrupted, but in the vulnerable spaces where you say the true thing and wait to see if the relationship is strong enough to hold it. I've learned to recognize the feeling that means I need to speak. It's a specific kind of tension in my chest, a tightness that comes from holding something that needs to be released. And for years, I'd feel that tension and ignore it. I'd rationalize it away, tell myself it wasn't important, it could wait, it wasn't worth the disruption. But that tension doesn't go away when you ignore it. It compounds, it builds, it turns into resentment, into distance, into that hollow feeling that comes from living at odds with yourself. So now, when I feel that tension, I take a steady exhale and I speak. Not impulsively, not without consideration, but from a place of integrity, from a place that understands silence has a cost that's too high to keep paying. And sometimes what comes out isn't perfect. Sometimes my timing is off, or my tone is sharper than I intended, but it's real. It's mine. It's the truth trying to find its way into the light. And I've learned that imperfect honesty is more valuable than perfect silence. That a clumsy truth builds more connection than an elegant lie. And that's when everything I believed fell apart. I realized that all my efforts to keep things smooth, never be difficult, to make loving me as easy as possible, they weren't generosity. They were fear. Fear that if people saw the real me, they'd leave. Fear that my truth was somehow less important than their comfort. Fear that I wasn't worth the effort it might take to love me fully. So I pre-rejected myself. I edited myself down to a version that felt safe. And in doing so, I guaranteed the exact loneliness I was trying to avoid. But here's the thing about fear-based decisions. They keep you safe, but they keep you small. They protect you from rejection, but they also protect you from real connection. They ensure you'll never be too much, but they also ensure you'll never be fully seen. And at some point, you have to ask yourself, is safety worth more than truth? Is comfort worth more than being known? Is avoiding rejection worth living as a ghost of who you actually are? I can't answer that for you, but I can tell you what I chose. I chose the risk of being too much over the guarantee of being easy. I chose the possibility of rejection over the certainty of being unknown. I chose to take up space, to have needs, to set boundaries, to speak difficult truths, even when it made people uncomfortable. And yes, some people left, but the ones who stayed, the ones who could hold my truth without needing me to shrink it, those relationships became deeper, richer, more real than anything I'd experienced when I was performing. Look at me for a second. I need you to understand this. The difficult thing I need to say to you isn't just about a specific situation or moment. It's about a pattern, a way we've been relating that requires one or both of us to stay small, to edit, to perform, to prioritize comfort over truth. And I can't do it anymore. Not because I don't love you, but because I love you enough to want something real, something that doesn't require constant curation, something built on who we actually are, not who we think we need to be. And I know that's scary. I know it disrupts what we've built. I know it requires both of us to expand beyond the comfortable roles we've been playing. But staying in those roles is killing us. Slowly, quietly, in ways we can feel but haven't been willing to name. And I'd rather risk everything by telling the truth than guarantee slow erosion by staying silent. I'd rather have the temporary discomfort of honesty than the permanent distance of pretending. So this is me, taking a steady exhale and saying what needs to be said. Not because it's easy, not because I'm sure how you'll respond, but because integrity matters more than comfort. Because being known matters more than being liked. Because I'd rather be alone and authentic than partnered and performing. And because I have to believe that you're strong enough for this, that you're capable of hearing hard things without breaking, that the love between us is sturdy enough to survive the truth. I'm not asking you to agree with everything I say. I'm not asking you to like it. or to make it easy for me. I'm asking you to meet me in the space where we're both real, where we both say the difficult things, where we both risk being too much because we understand that anything less is too little, where we build something that doesn't require constant maintenance because it's built on a foundation that's actually solid. And if you can't meet me there, I need to know. Not so I can resent you for it, but so I can make informed decisions about what's possible between us. Because I'm done pretending, done performing, done building relationships on foundations of edited realities and managed truths. I'm offering you the real thing. Imperfect, complicated, sometimes uncomfortable, but authentic. And I need to know if that's something you actually want. Not the idea of it, but the reality of it, with all the friction and growth and difficult conversations that come with it. I need to tell you something about the moment you decide to live honestly. It doesn't make everything easier. It doesn't solve all your problems or guarantee that people will suddenly understand you. What it does is simpler and more profound. It brings you back to yourself. That version of you that got buried under years of accommodation and performance and strategic silence. The one who knows what they feel, what they need, what they can and cannot accept. The one who doesn't need permission to take up space. And when you find your way back to that person, everything changes. Not because the world shifts, but because you stop negotiating with it from a position of fear. I spent so long believing that honesty was a luxury, something I could afford only when circumstances were perfect, when the relationship was solid enough, when the other person was in the right headspace, when I'd found exactly the right words. But here's what I learned. If you wait for the perfect moment to tell the truth, you'll wait forever. Because there is no perfect moment. There's only the moment you're in. The one where something true is trying to move through you and you have a choice. You can let it through, or you can swallow it and carry it around like weight. And I'm tired of carrying weight that doesn't belong inside me. So I made a decision. I stopped waiting for permission to be honest. Stopped waiting for the ideal conditions. Stopped waiting for proof that the other person could handle it. I started speaking from a place of integrity, trusting that if the relationship was meant to survive, it would. And if it wasn't, then prolonging it with edited truths was just delaying an inevitable end. That shift, from hoping honesty would be safe, to accepting that it might not be, but doing it anyway, that's where my life actually began. Have you ever noticed how much energy it takes to maintain a lie? Not just the big obvious lies, but the small ones. The daily edits, the things you don't say because saying them might create friction. The feelings you minimize because expressing them fully feels like too much. The needs you suppress because acknowledging them might make you seem demanding. That constant editing requires tremendous energy. Energy that could be going toward building something real, creating something meaningful, becoming someone whole. But instead, it's being burned maintaining a version of reality that's fundamentally false. And here's what that energy drain does over time. It makes you small. Not physically, but spiritually. It shrinks your sense of what's possible. It teaches you that your truth is negotiable, that your voice is optional, that your reality matters less than someone else's comfort. And you can live that way for years, decades even. You can build an entire life around making yourself digestible to others. But eventually, you'll wake up and realize, I don't recognize myself anymore. The person I've become is so far from the person I actually am that I've lost the map back. But here's what nobody told me about finding your way back. It doesn't require a dramatic transformation or a complete life overhaul. It starts with one true thing. One moment where you take a steady exhale and you say what's real instead of what's easy. One boundary you set, even though setting it might disappoint someone. One need you name, even though naming it feels vulnerable. One truth you speak, even though speaking it risks everything. And then another, and another, until slowly, gradually, you rebuild a life that's aligned with who you actually are instead of who you've been pretending to be. I'm in that process right now. And I won't lie to you, it's uncomfortable. Some people don't like the unedited version. Some relationships can't survive the transition from performance to authenticity. Some dynamics that worked when I was small and accommodating fall apart when I start taking up real space. And there are moments when I'm tempted to go back, to make myself easier, to swallow the truth one more time, to prioritize someone else's comfort over my own integrity. But then I remember what that cost me. The years of feeling unseen. the relationships that looked perfect but felt empty, the exhaustion of maintaining a self that wasn't actually mine. And that's when everything I believed fell apart. I realized that the discomfort of honesty, the temporary friction, the difficult conversations, the risk of being too much, all of it is less painful than the slow death of self abandonment. All of it is more bearable than living at odds with your own truth. All of it is worth it if it means you get to be known, really known, not for who you're pretending to be, but for who you actually are. So when I say this is hard to say, but you need to hear it, I'm not just talking about the specific words I'm about to speak. I'm talking about a broader invitation, an invitation to stop performing, to stop editing, to stop making yourself small enough to fit into spaces that were never meant for you, to take a steady exhale and claim the space you actually need, to speak the truths you've been swallowing, to set the boundaries you've been avoiding, to show up as the fullest, most complicated, most honest version of yourself, and trust that the people who are meant to be in your life will rise to meet you there. I know what you're thinking. That sounds idealistic. That in the real world, honesty has consequences. That sometimes you have to compromise, to accommodate, to keep the peace. And you're right. I'm not suggesting you become brutally honest without consideration or care. I'm not suggesting you use truth as a weapon or honesty as an excuse for cruelty. What I'm suggesting is that you stop betraying yourself in the name of keeping others comfortable. That you stop treating your truth like it's less important than someone else's ease. That you start building a life where your integrity is non-negotiable. Because here's what I know about people who live this way. They're not always liked, but they're respected. They're not always comfortable, but they're whole. They're not always surrounded by dozens of people, but the people in their lives actually know them. And that knowing, that experience of being fully seen and still chosen, it's worth every uncomfortable conversation. It's worth every relationship that couldn't survive your authenticity. It's worth the temporary loneliness that comes from refusing to compromise your truth. Look at me one more time. Really, look. Because this is the heart of what I need you to understand. I'm not asking you to be perfect. I'm not asking you to have everything figured out. I'm not asking you to never make mistakes or always have the right words. I'm asking you to be real, to let the people in your life see you, actually see you, in all your complexity and contradiction, to trust that you're worth the effort it might take to understand you, to believe that your truth matters, even when it's inconvenient or uncomfortable or difficult. And I'm asking you to demand the same from the people you love, to stop accepting edited versions of them, to stop letting them hide behind performances designed to keep you comfortable, to invite them into the kind of honesty that's uncomfortable but real, to build relationships that can hold the full weight of truth instead of collapsing under the pressure of pretense. Because that's where real love lives, not in the spaces where everything is easy, but in the spaces where everything is honest. This is my gentle insistence. Not that you become someone you're not, but that you become more fully who you are. That you take a steady exhale and speak what needs to be spoken. That you stop waiting for permission to be honest and start living from a place of integrity. That you choose the temporary discomfort of truth over the permanent distance of silence. That you build a life where you don't have to edit yourself to be loved, where your voice matters, where your truth has weight, where you can exhale fully and know that the people around you can hold all of you, not just the convenient parts. I don't know how you'll respond to this. I don't know if you're ready for the kind of honesty I'm offering. I don't know if what we've built can survive the transition from comfortable to real. But I do know this. I can't keep being the edited version. I can't keep prioritizing your comfort over my integrity. I can't keep swallowing truths that need to be spoken. So I'm taking a steady exhale. And I'm saying what needs to be said. Not because it's easy, but because staying silent is harder. Not because I know how it will land, but because keeping it inside is costing me more than saying it ever could. And whatever happens next, whether you meet me in this honesty or whether you can't, I'll know I chose integrity. I'll know I stopped betraying myself in the name of keeping things easy. I'll know I honored both of us by trusting you with the truth. And that matters. That matters more than comfort, more than convenience, more than the temporary ease of one more swallowed truth. Because at the end of the day, the only person I have to live with for the rest of my life is me. And I refuse to spend that life as a ghost of who I actually am. So this is it, the hard thing you needed to hear. Not because it's harsh, but because it's true. And truth, I've learned, is the only foundation worth building on. Everything else is sand.